Welcome to Faithful Doubt. My name's Jordan. Today we are talking about Joseph. Hey guys, welcome to this episode. We are continuing in our stories of the Bible. In the last episode, I talked about the story of Abraham. Today we are continuing down through the line of Abraham all the way to Joseph, and eventually we will end at the beginning of the book of Exodus. But before we go any further, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social platforms. The handles are right there. And remember our website, faithfuldoubtpodcast.com. All our episodes are there, and some merchandise as well. And continuing in our new tradition of promoting a local organization for each episode, today we are promoting The Refuge in Greenwood, Indiana. The Refuge is a food pantry in Greenwood, and they are a faith-based community outreach center that's supported by different churches, organizations, and businesses and individuals. And their goal is to provide assistance for physical, emotional, academic, and spiritual needs of Johnson County residents. So if that is something that sounds interesting to you, or like you would like to be a part of, or you want to support, please go to the refugeinc.com website and you can find out more there. So continuing on in the Old Testament, we are going to end with the story of Joseph today, which will also bring the book of Genesis to an end. I have not covered every story in the book of Genesis that I think is worth covering. The Tower of Babel comes to mind. There's so much between Abraham to Joseph that I'm not covering. So please don't think that, I'm leaving things out because I don't find them interesting. It's just a matter of I want to cover what I think the main line or themes of Scripture point towards. And so in the last episode, what I talked about is reading Scripture through the lens of Jesus Christ. You have to read it that way. Everything in Scripture points to Jesus, and you have to read it through that lens. And so what we see with the story of Abraham is his line of descendants going from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob and then to Joseph. We are getting the line of the promise that will eventually bring salvation to the world, and Jesus will come through that line. And it goes all the way back through Noah to Seth and then to Adam, of course. So let's start with the line here. So Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, and before that they had Abraham slept with Hagar, if you remember, and had Ishmael at the pleading of Sarai because she wanted Abram to have offspring. So Ishmael is the oldest, Isaac is the youngest, and he is the line of the promise. And as I also said in the last episode, you're going to see that the youngest son continually receives the blessing and the promise over the oldest son because in the culture of that day, the oldest was the favorite, was the one who would receive all the inheritance. And what God does, the culture of heaven is countercultural to ours. And so God turns this culture on its head of favoring the older son, the oldest. So Abraham and Hagar have Ishmael. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. The promise continues through Isaac. Isaac marries Rebekah, who has Esau and then Jacob. Jacob is where the line of the promise will continue, and he's also referred to as Israel. Hint, hint, the nation of Israel will come through Jacob. Jacob marries many women, and again, just because we read something in Scripture does not mean that it is endorsing that behavior. So Jacob has, I think, 4 wives or maybe more concubines as well. So that does not mean that the Bible is saying, yeah, it's a good thing to have many wives. It's a recording of what happened, and what you see as a result of Jacob's behavior is a lot of destruction, a lot of horrible things come from his behavior and marrying many women. But that doesn't mean that Yahweh is unfaithful. God is still going to work through Jacob, despite his unfaithfulness, despite his sin. This is the point, or not the point. This is what's so great about God, is it his faithfulness is not dependent upon our faithfulness. And that is the point of a covenant relationship. Okay, so you have contractual relationships, right? We have these everyday or transactional relationships. I agreed to give you something, and in return, you give me something. If I do not feel as though you are meeting the agreed upon terms of that transaction or contract, then we can break it off at any point. A covenant, that is not how a covenant relationship works. A covenant says no matter what the other party does in the relationship, I will adhere to what I have vowed to do. This is why marriage is a separate relationship from anything else in this world, because it says, I vow to love you no matter what you do to me or what you don't do. And this is the relationship God has with us. He has vowed and promised to love us no matter what we do, and continue his promise through the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, no matter what they do. And you can view that as evil. I don't know why. It's grace. It is an attitude of grace, which is we don't deserve that kind of love. And so Jacob, one of his wives, Rachel, this is where the line of promise will continue through. They have Joseph. And Jacob has 12 sons who eventually become the 12 tribes of Israel. And the oldest is Reuben. The second oldest is Simeon. And you can read for yourself in Genesis the other sons. But eventually you get to Judah. Judah is important. And then Jacob. Now, Jacob, you've probably heard the story of Jacob. He gets the coat of colors, the colorful coat, which represents a royal garb. But also Jacob is hated by his brothers. They are threatened by him because he is favored by Jacob, and he has the line of the promise. So his brothers end up kidnapping him, throwing him in a pit, and Jacob is eventually enslaved by slavers passing by and taken to Egypt. They thought he was dead. They left him for dead, and they lied to their father Jacob. And so Jacob just thinks that Joseph has been taken from him and he's gone. And so the Jacob actually ends up cursing his other sons, except for Judah. Judah receives a promise, and we're going to see that the scepter will not pass from Judah, is what it says, which means the line of kings will come from Judah. And as we all know, well, not all of us know this, but as you may not know, Jesus comes from the tribe of Judah, and he's referred to as the Lion of Judah. So Jacob is taken by slavers to Egypt, and this is how faithful God is. God doesn't let Jacob die. And in fact, Jacob becomes an advisor to Pharaoh, the most powerful man at that time on the entire earth. And if you remember God's promise to Abraham to bless the other nations through him, this is what God is doing. He is blessing Egypt through Joseph. Joseph becomes the advisor to Pharaoh and ends up saving people from famine because he convinced Pharaoh to save a certain amount of grain each year for a famine. And he interprets dreams for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh loves him as his own, basically. And he becomes the second Joseph, a Jew, becomes the second most powerful man in all of Egypt because he's so trusted and loved by Pharaoh for what he does. And God blesses Pharaoh in Egypt through Joseph, and he blesses Joseph. But the point of this story, again, is it points to Jesus and the type of blessing that God gives through Joseph and eventually Judah. And all of this points to the coming of Christ later on. So this is kind of the last story. This is the last story in Genesis, and we're gonna see that it's the resolution. The story is the resolution of Genesis, and what Genesis has done is it's taken us on this adventure of paradise lost, plan for salvation, forgiveness, from famine to feast, and from promise to fulfillment. And we end with the 12 sons becoming the 12 tribes of Israel, and Israel multiplies. And we're going to pick up in Exodus, and the next story we're going to talk about is the story of Moses. And we're going to see that as we get into Exodus, the 12 tribes of Israel have been taken captive by the Egyptians and Pharaoh. So this is the conclusion of Genesis. Jacob, we go from Adam to Seth, Seth to Noah, Noah to Abraham, Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, Jacob to Judah and Joseph. And eventually we will get to Jesus through that line. So if you have questions or comments, again, I didn't cover this story too extensively. I just don't have time to cover all these stories extensively. But the story of Joseph is wonderful. I encourage you to read more of it. It is, we see a forecasting of kingship through Joseph with the royal garb, the colorful coat, also becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt, represents Jesus Christ ascending to the right hand of the Father in heaven. So you see all these kind of foreshadowing events of Jesus Christ, and I hope that you pick up a Bible and read the story for yourself. But if you have questions or comments or thoughts on this story that were not expressed here, or you just have a question over something I've said, please comment below. Let us know. And as always, guys, I will see you next time.